We begin with breaking news out of Israel. Plumes of smoke are rising from the skyline of Tel Aviv this evening. Iran says that it has launched dozens of missiles at Israel. Explosions were heard in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem as sirens sounded out across the country. Iran's state news agency says the missiles are retaliation for earlier strikes by Israel on multiple targets in Iran, including nuclear sites, an airport, and the capital, Tehran. Several of Iran's top commanders were killed in those attacks. All right, we want to go straight now to Jerusalem. Our correspondent, Tania Krämer, she joins us on the phone. She has taken shelter. She joins us now, as we said, by telephone. Tania, tell us what is happening where you are right now.
Well, we had around 9 p.m., we got the first alerts from the Israeli military that we should take shelter now. I think the whole country is now sheltering in place. People have been asked to go to the protected spaces because you see on the, the alert app on phones, all of Israel and also in the occupied West Bank, it's red. Basically, it's red. So this means there are incoming rockets. So we had at least 2 waves now of rockets coming in. I'm also now in a shelter inside, so many people also have to stay in staircases. Not everybody has a protected space at home. So these are rather tough moments, I would say, for many here. But we have been told by the Magen David Adom, this is one of the rescue services here, there were the first numbers. Some of the missiles apparently got through, so they're treating 5 injured people, some moderate and some were only injured by shrapnel from the interceptors as well. But these are just initial figures. Now we understand that at least in the first wave there were 7 hits reported. The army has said we are not supposed to report the location where it came down. So this is all incoming, and there is another wave on its way as far as we understand. So, people have to stay in shelter right now.
And Tania, since you can't see what we're seeing, we're seeing pictures of the skyline of Tel Aviv. Maybe we could bring those pictures back up and show our viewers. And we were seeing lots of explosions, and it looked like we were seeing lots of missiles getting through that Iron Dome. You've been reporting on this situation for a long time. I mean, there was the warning coming from the Israeli government that Iran could have the capacity and the ability to launch a massive airstrike against the country, right?
Absolutely, and I think this is exactly the problem. If there are about 100 rockets or 100 missiles, they might be able to intercept them. But if it becomes more and more, then these missiles might go through. And even in one of the warnings of the military, they warned again, this is not hermetic. There could be those hits, and that's what we've been seeing in the past hour or so. Those explosions and hits in several locations. We're waiting for confirmation where, in which areas around there all went down. It has been mainly reported from the Tel Aviv areas, but it's all across the country where, missile alerts are coming up. So this is exactly the problem. Even if there is a defense shield, it is not 100%. And this is why people have to follow those home front guidelines and just stay in shelter wherever they can, if they have a shelter.
And Tania, tell us, how does that work for our viewers, people who have maybe never been in this situation? What happens when the air raid sirens sound? You go into maybe a bunker or somewhere you go for safety. Do you wait until do you get a signal that it's all clear, that you can come back out? I mean, when do you know that it's safe to come back out?
Well, usually what's happening now, it's always an alert. It's not even, people don't even wait for the for the sirens. There's usually an alert on your phone from the home front command saying, this is happening, this is coming. We had in the recent weeks, we had, these launches from Yemen, for example. So they introduced that 5 minutes beforehand, you knew this is coming, so you could take shelter. Now, at this time right now, people are just have to stay in the shelter because it's coming in and it's coming in. So, you don't go out and usually if it's one wave of attack, you would go out after maybe 10, 15 minutes. You might hear the sound of explosion, the interception. But right now, people are asked actually to stay where they are because, this is apparently continuing from what we understand. So, and then we would be waiting for an alert or for a message that, now they think people can move out again, but we are not yet there.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen such extremes in the Middle East in just, recent memory. We've talked about the war in Gaza. We talked about Israelis and how angry they have been with their government, particularly with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and how then the conflict with Iran has seemed to put all of that into the background. And you've seen this unity among Israelis that they want to get through this conflict and that they see this as maybe an opportunity to finally rid themselves of the threat from Iran. This is a life and death situation right now, right, for almost everyone in the country. How long does that unity last when you're spending your evenings in a bomb shelter?
That's a good question. I think it depends, how long this will take, and also certainly, we have to wait, for how many missiles made it through. What is the result of all of this? But I think a lot of people, as you rightly said, they do support this. Of course, not everyone. I mean, probably you get different answers from different people, but there is a sense that somehow this was necessary. I think, this has been talked about for many, many years, and this threat is seen as existential in a way. But I think it also depends, how this operation moves forward. Is this now the thing that will come for, this will last for several days or weeks or just a few hours? How much retaliation there is. I mean, I think it's too early now to say how people will react, in the coming hours or days.
And we've been reporting, Tania, that the Israeli Prime Minister, he said that the Americans knew what Israel was going to do, but the Americans have been clear that they were not involved in what is happening right now. What do Israelis think about that? Do they want the Americans to be involved? I mean, what's the feeling about that?
Well, I think there is the understanding that President Trump certainly, he was informed about this, and that there's certainly, no daylight between the two countries, although there were these conflicting messages. I mean, because there were these talks ongoing between the U.S. and Iran about the nuclear program, and, so Trump had said, the U.S. president had asked Israel not to go along, but that has changed in the past couple of days a bit, and there is the expectation that the U.S. will stand with Israel in this case. We don't know about this defensive shield. In the previous Iran attacks, when there was a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran last October, for example, there was this defensive shield with, Israel's allies. But I think we have to wait and see. We're just sitting right now in the shelter and bunker and seeing it on the screen, on the phone screen, what's going on around here in the area, how successful that is, or, who's helping here.
Well, Tania, we certainly hope that you are able to stay safe and sound. We will be checking in with you later in the evening. Our Israel correspondent, Tania Krämer, she is in a bomb shelter, a stairwell, somewhere in Jerusalem right now. Tania, thank you.
Miri Eisin is a fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University in Israel and a former colonel in the Israeli army. We asked her if she sees this as the beginning of a full-blown regional war.
I don't know if I would call it a regional war, but it already right now is between Israel and Iran. And in between Israel and Iran, for Israel to get to Iran, for Iran to attack Israel, the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, Iraq, Syria, those are countries that are along the way. They are going to be impacted by it no matter what. It was mentioned before that Jordan intercepted some of the Iranian UAVs, the drones that they fired against Israel after we attacked on one of the different stages. And that's because it's on the way. If Iran flies drones towards Israel, they're going to fly over either Iraq or Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria. So yes, it's all within the region. Israel was very clear. Yes, this is the beginning of a war. I state that because we don't usually say that we're starting a war. Both the Prime Minister and the Chief of Staff of the military in these hours as we're still attacking have said we have started a war against the Islamic regime's capabilities, against their nuclear capabilities, against the platforms that they have. They have missiles that can reach Israel. By the way, those are missiles that can reach Berlin. They have a variety of capabilities, and those proxies in the area have all been supplied by that Islamic regime capability, and that's what's being attacked now.
That was Miri Eisin speaking to us earlier. To get the perspective on this from Iran, we can speak to DW's Iran expert, Theresa Tropper. So, Theresa, what's the latest, if you could tell us, on Israel strikes in Iran?
Well, we know that these strikes are not over yet. They are still ongoing in parts of the country, and they might actually go on for days, if not weeks. So at the moment, it's somewhat hard to tell how big the damage is because there's not a lot of information out there about the military structures attacked. We're seeing smoke rising above the facility in Natanz, and more recently also from an airbase in Tabriz, that's in the north of the country, in the northwest. But how badly are they damaged? We would have to take Iran's word for it at the moment. What we do know is that some of the residential areas attacked in Tehran are severely damaged. And since these happened in densely populated areas, it's kind of hard to imagine that there were no civilian casualties at all. Now, many people in Tehran and also elsewhere in the country will not mourn the death of these senior commanders of the military and the Revolutionary Guards, but attacks by a foreign state on residential areas, killing fellow Iranians who just happen to live next door, that could be a different story. And we heard the Iranian foreign minister saying there that this latest wave of attacks is a declaration of war. And it's very important to know that in a war like that, Iranians would be heavily at risk. That's because Israelis can count on their government and their military to defend them and protect them. Iranians cannot, and they do not. First, because they know that Iran does not have the powerful air defense Israel has with the Iron Dome. And it also does not have strong allies in the region anymore because they were all weakened by Israel in the past years. And secondly, and maybe even more importantly, because they know that the Islamic Republic has a notoriously bad track record when it comes to protecting its citizens. So people know it's mainly its own survival the Islamic Republic is interested in.
Mm-hmm. Theresa, we heard the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying earlier, talking about this operation, calling it Operation Rising Lion. Can you tell us what that means? What does that signify?
Well, the lion is one of the most powerful symbols in Iran's history, both for its identity and also for political opposition movements. So I can hardly imagine that this choice of a name is not deliberately done. The lion and sun emblem dates back to pre-Islamic times in Iran, but later became the official symbol for the monarchy during the Pahlavi era. It was all over the flag, the military insignia, the currency even, and until today it remains a very powerful symbol for parts of the Iranian opposition, both within the country and also especially maybe abroad. And this opposition is certainly hearing that call. Reza Pahlavi, the son of Iran's last Shah, who now lives in the US and is considered among the most important figures in Iranian opposition, has already issued a call on social media to, quote, overthrow the Islamic Republic through street protest and nationwide strikes now. Of course, whether or not that will play out is very much up in the air. Historically, attacks against Iran have had people rallying around the flag. more, but with the level of protests we've seen in the last couple of years against the Islamic Republic, it's kind of hard to imagine that. And apparently Iran's leadership feels the same, because we're already getting reports that in some parts of the country communication has been disrupted. And that's something the Islamic Republic routinely does if it fears protests.
This confrontation, Theresa, between Israel and Iran has been escalating since the October the 7th attacks on Israel by Hamas. But what we're seeing now does seem to be different.
Absolutely. I mean, we've heard it, a declaration of war, and Iran's supreme leader has warned Israel it would face bitter and painful fate over the attacks. And the Iranian military said there would be no limits to its response. That, of course, could be the usual harsh rhetoric, but Iran will have to live up to that to a certain degree if it wants to keep its credibility. I mean, let's remember, after the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah commander in Tehran last year, Iran hit back with around 200 missiles targeting Israel, most of which, of course, were intercepted. So a retaliatory action back then was considered by some to be somewhat restrained. This time it feels like they need a bigger reaction than that. And then, of course, we'll have to wait and see whether or not the United States will have to get involved when it comes to defending Israel, and whether or not that could lead to a direct confrontation. And that could escalate this whole thing even further, of course.
Theresa, we will leave it there. But thank you so much. That's DW's Iran expert, Theresa Tropper. And I'm joined now by Simon Mabon, who's a lecturer in international relations at Lancaster University in the UK. Good to see you, Simon. Thank you for your time. There have, of course, long been concerns about a wider conflict in the Middle East. Can I ask you, what's your assessment of what we're seeing here and potentially what this could lead to?
Yeah, well, it's obviously a deeply concerning moment for all manner of reasons. It looked like only a day ago that things were moving in a positive direction. It looked like there was going to be a nuclear agreement, if not on the weekend, then at some point in the future. The noises were largely positive, but obviously this latest round of escalation, of outbreak of more serious conflict has obviously jeopardized that, if not completely destroyed the hope of a nuclear deal right now. I guess we've seen the seeds of this. We've seen hints of all of this happening across the past 20 months or so. But this is the latest escalation, the most serious escalation so far. And it's prompted some pretty fierce rhetorical flourishes from senior Iranian officials. But at the same time, it's prompted some outrage and some expressions of solidarity, Muslim solidarity from the Gulf states, from Saudi Arabia in particular. So I think there is a marked shift in the intensity of these attacks, but it doesn't really point to a shift in how the lay of the land is in terms of the Middle Eastern regional security alignment at present.
Just to come back to a point that you were making earlier, Simon, the talks between Iran and the US on the status of Iran's nuclear program, they've obviously been ongoing. So you're saying these attacks will put an end to any negotiations?
Well, that would be my reading. First thing this morning, when all of this was unfolding, there were suggestions that they would continue to go ahead in Oman. The Omanis were very quick to say this is a deliberate attempt to thwart the negotiations. And speaking to colleagues and friends who've been looking at this closely, I think that's what this is. This is a last-ditch attempt to prevent any type of nuclear deal between the United States and Iran. And this is obviously something that certain Israeli officials, Benjamin Netanyahu in particular, have been working towards for decades. We know that. We've heard his rhetoric, we've heard his speeches, we've seen his approach to Iran. And so it's hardly surprising that when there looked like there was the possibility of a deal that Donald Trump seemed to be largely supportive of, that there would be a spoiler to throw a spanner in the proverbial works. Now, whether this is just posturing, whether this is just an attempt to try and get an even harsher deal on Iran, it remains to be seen. We know that Donald Trump has said something similar, urging Iran to make a deal before it's too late. But I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for any talks to go ahead in Oman this weekend.
as you say, Trump has been pressuring Iran to strike a deal. He's now warning that Israel's attacks, quote, will only get worse. What's your response to those kind of comments?
Well, earlier this week, he was urging Israel not to attack Iran. So it strikes me that President Trump is struggling to control his ally, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I think there's a real sort of friction emerging there in terms of Israeli strategy and US strategy. It's incomprehensible for the Trump administration to put so much time and effort into getting a nuclear deal, only to then pull it all away at the very last minute to support Israeli attacks on Iran. It's not the sort of the modus operandi of the Trump administration. So that suggests to me that there are some deep tensions emerging in terms of how to approach the Iranian nuclear question between Israel and between the United States. And at present, it seems that Donald Trump is just falling in line behind Benjamin Netanyahu.
You know, this contradiction of Trump calling for diplomacy with Iran, and then we see these strikes. Is there any way that Israel would have launched these strikes against Iran without US backing?
I can't say for sure. I have an instinct, and my instinct would be that yes, there is a way of doing it, but that it's difficult to ascertain exactly who knew what. The US is saying that they didn't know, they weren't involved. The US is saying that they weren't involved. They have not said, as far as I'm aware, that they didn't know about them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they gave them a green light. So there's lots of different levels of ambiguity at play here. Did the US know about them, and did they approve them? Did they know about them and ask for them to not take place? Or did they neither know about them nor approve them? It's really difficult to say, and I don't think this is something that we'll get a clear sense of, because it reveals the intricate power dynamics between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. And those are not dynamics that either one of them and their egos would be particularly happy about being made public. So I think it's really difficult to ascertain. But in answer to your question, a very short answer, yes, I think it's possible. I think it's conceivable.
Simon, thank you so much for that. That's international relations expert Simon Mabon from Lancaster University.
Thank you.
We can speak now to Hans-Jakob Schindler. He's a senior director at the Counter-Extremism Project. That's an international organisation that publishes research on extremism and terrorism. Welcome to DW. We just heard there from a former colonel in the Israeli Defence Forces that Israel's saying this is the start of a war. Can I ask you, what does this mean for the region?
We are in a very, very dangerous escalation spiral at the moment, where we just do not know to what extent this conflict is going to go. Clearly, what the Iranian regime's initial response was to be more of a political response, sending 100 drones after they failed in April and in October last year. Seems to me clearly as a response that you wanted to sell on a domestic front without escalating the situation any further. But as soon as those drones were shut down, there is a second wave now going on of Israel against Iran, which, if you want to take out the nuclear program in Iran, is an absolute must. These 100 strikes were divided between key military figures of the regime, installations of the nuclear program, but also military installations. So they were nowhere near destroying the entire nuclear program. So it had to be expected and was announced that there are going to be more. Now the question is, how is Iran going to respond? Is it going to attack US bases? The US Secretary of State has already warned against that. Is it disrupting oil and liquid natural gas flows out of the Strait of Hormuz? There are escalation levels which we have luckily not yet reached, but are within the probability right now.
So Israel's main priority, you were just saying, is taking out Iran's nuclear program. Is that the number one focus for Israel?
That is the stated focus and priority, and why they do these attacks. Obviously, in order to do so, they also have to attack air defense installations and also launch sites for missiles and drones, because they have to expect that Iran is going to respond in some kind. And that's why you see this mixture of high-level military commanders, nuclear installations, but also military installations in Iran. And that can really quickly escalate into a much broader conflict.
And in terms of Iran's response, To what extent will Iran be able to push back, to defend itself?
Well, clearly, and one of the reasons why Israel was eager for quite a while now, since October last year, to do a military attack, is that this, in a military sense, prevents a quite opportune window of opportunity for Israel. The Islamic Republic has never been weaker in its existence than it is right now, bear the Iran-Iraq war, where the proxies that it used to use as a deterrence against Israel, in particular Hezbollah, but also Hamas, the Houthis, to a certain extent the Iraqi militias, are all weakened. The Assad regime is removed. He has shown in April and October last year that it's both ballistic missile, but also its drone program, which were key in the establishing a deterrence in 2019 when the Houthis in Iran attacked a site in Saudi Arabia via the same systems, are now ineffective. And in response to October last year, the attack on Israel, Israel had very effectively removed the most modern air defense systems in Iran. So militarily, this was a key moment where Israel clearly wanted to take this opportunity before the Iranians are able to rebuild their air defense systems and their proxies around the region.
President Trump has just called Israel's attack on Iran an excellent attack. He's also warning that Israel's attacks will only get worse. I'm quoting him there. Just yesterday, Trump was calling for diplomacy. So how strong would you say US support for Israel is right now?
Look, I mean, very clearly there was a phone call between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump. President Trump could have stopped Netanyahu. It's unclear if he gave a green light, but it's pretty clear that he did not tell him to stop, as he had done in the couple of months beforehand. The reason, in my interpretation, why this was the case is because the negotiations with the Iranians did not go very well. The Iranians rejected an initial Iranian proposal, a US proposal, and wanted to give a counter proposal, but wanted to keep the domestic enrichment capabilities, which is the key point for the Trump administration that has to be removed from Iran. So he seems to be wanting to use the situation now as leverage in the negotiations, and it remains to be seen whether the Iranian side, if they are continuing to be under attack, is willing to continue with the negotiations at this particular point. There was supposed to be a meeting in 2 days on Sunday in Oman. I'm not sure if the Iranian side is going to show up.
Hans-Jakob Schindler from the Counter-Extremism Project. Thank you so much.
Thank you.